Hi, the book that I am going to recommend to you today is Metaphysics, A Contemporary Introduction by Michael J. Loux. And this book is the foundational text for introducing contemporary metaphysics in the analytical tradition. This book is published by Routledge as a part of the Contemporary Introductions to Philosophy. By the way, it's a great series. You should check out their other books too, and we hope to review the other ones. But let's just focus on the one on metaphysics for now. Now, this book is not how it comes in. I printed this myself because I wasn't able to get my hands on a new edition, but this is basically the same kind of content. So, why is this book important? Now, if you have went through the other videos, you probably have seen my partner Henry introducing this book to you, Reasons and Persons. And I think there is a big distinction between these two types of books. A book like Reasons and Persons is a polemic book. It argues for a certain position. Well, a book like Metaphysics, A Contemporary Introduction, is a textbook and an introductory text. So it doesn't really take on a clear position when it comes to important metaphysical issues. Rather, it considers both sides and it argues for the merits and the downfalls of all its positions. And it's especially interesting because the author himself isn't really working in he does not have standard metaphysical views. In fact, the author, I believe, is an Aristotelian, and we don't have to get into the details here, but basically, I think this book does have a great deal of diversity in terms of the views it presents. Um, so I think we can go through this just very quickly. So it's intended for students who have already done an introductory philosophy course. If you're interested in what books that course may cover, you can check out our other videos. So this is basically a fresh look on the central topics in metaphysics, and it's important to mention fresh because there is some new views presented here. So if you're familiar with the kind of metaphysics practiced by people like Leibniz or people like Hegel even, this book is very, very different. In fact, those names weren't even mentioned, not even Immanuel Kant. So why still do I recommend you this book? The reason is it brings you up to date and it enables you to read the contemporary literature on metaphysical issues. And let's do a chapter breakdown. So the first chapter is on the problem of universals, on the problem of metaphysical realism. This is, of course, a very important debate, although not one that's very popular at the moment, it seems. And it introduces the issue very well. It talks about types of realism and talks about the objections to them. The second chapter is on nominalism. So you can see the dialectic here. It's going to first present to position A and then position B, and then it's going to evaluate both positions. Again, nominalism comes in a lot of shapes and forms, and the author does a great job introducing things like metalinguistic nominalism, trope theory, fictionalism, and so on. If you're interested in things like fictionalism, which isn't really something a metaphysical textbook would cover compared to, let's say, a meta-ontology book, I would also cover the book called Ontology and Meta-ontology in another video that you can check out. But here I'll say the author himself leans a bit more on nominalism, but again, this book is quite balanced in terms of how it presents its views. And the book is written in great clarity. There is far more examples than you would find in an ordinary text in metaphysics. The third chapter is on concrete particulars, and again, this book is structured very logically. So you would need some knowledge of, say, like the metaphysics of tropes from nominalism in order to kind of understand the debate in concrete particulars. So this book is structured in a very fantastic way. Moving on, you have propositions, the necessary and the possible or modality. Personally, I think, his position on modality is really split between two important philosophers, David Lewis and Alvin Plantinga. And he does do justice to, I believe, at least David Lewis. I'm not that sure if he does justice to Plantinga, but again, he's presenting a lot of diversity and plurality of views. And then we have causation. I definitely think that more can be said on this issue, and I think that causation is one of the great mysteries of metaphysics. So it's not really a negative point in the book. It's just, I think, if you really want to study causation, there are other books you can try. For instance, Causation: A Very Short Introduction, the classical series. That is a great book. Although in that book, again, the author himself is also an Aristotelian, and the ending was quite vague, without a clear position, which again shows how difficult the issue is. And moving on from that, we have the nature of time, and this is a fantastic chapter. Um, you hear people talking about the A theory, the B theory, and it's very confusing, and it might confuse a lot of people who want to figure out the nature of time, but doesn't really have like a good way to step into the literature. And this is a great chapter on that. And then moving on from there, we have concrete particulars 2, persistence through time. This is basically a logical extension of chapter 7, the nature of time. And it's considering now, like, once we know the nature of time, well, what about the entities that persist through time? And it does talk about the two types of persistence, namely endurance and perdurance. And again, it's written very clearly. It's a fantastic text. The last chapter is on the challenge of anti-realism. Now, the anti-realism presented here is not the kind of physical or scientific realism, but it's more like the semantic debate between like Dummett and Putnam. It's that kind of debate on realism. But again, this chapter is great, although not as interdisciplinary as I would hope it might be. And that basically covers the content of this book. And if you look into this book in particular, you can see that many of the chapters present claims in clearly numbered propositions, which is fantastic for the reader. And it also introduces you to a kind of way to write analytic philosophy. I mean, if you go read the books of Plantinga, for instance, he really likes to number off his propositions, kind of mathematical in his approach. But it's really appreciated right now. And just on the note of chapters, they actually released a fourth edition of this book. They released a fourth edition quite recently, in 2017, in fact. So this is kind of the edition that is standard in most kind of undergraduate classes in metaphysics. I also have the fourth edition. I took a look inside. I don't think that much have been changed other than the 2 added chapters by Thomas M. Crisp. I mean, the 2 added chapters are great. If you don't pay close attention, you probably wouldn't even notice the style changing, although it's by 2 completely different authors. And the added chapters are, number 1, the nature of parts and wholes, which is definitely a necessary addition. I mean, mereology, the study of parts and wholes, it's so important and so kind of all over the place in metaphysics, especially when you want to do things like theory of ground. You might be interested in Schaffler's metaphysical monism. You might not want to know, for instance, like, the whole and the part, which one is prior to which. And a lot of texts would really assume that you have knowledge in mereology because, usually parts and wholes are defined in quite, I would say, compared to other notions, quite precisely. So that is something that many people would just assume that you know, and this textbook gives a very good introduction to to the person who wants to know more about this. The last one, the other added chapter, isn't really necessary, but it's very interesting as well. It's a problem of metaphysical indeterminacy. And this is basically kind of a response to the sorties paradox, and there's a lot of great views, and I'll just mention 2. So the first is David Lewis's approach of I can't get it off the top of my head, but there's another approach by Williamson, his epistemic indeterminacy. So again, these added chapters are great. The mereology one is certainly necessary, so I do recommend you to get the newer edition so that you can have the chapter on mereology. But the old book does great. It's very self-contained, and most of the content are not greatly altered from edition to edition. Now, just to end this video, I'm going to read you the Amazon kind of description they have. So Metaphysics, a Contemporary Introduction is for students who have already completed an introductory philosophy course and need a fresh look at the central topics in the core subject of metaphysics. It is essential reading for any student of the subject. The fourth edition is revised and updated to include 2 new chapters on parson holes and metaphysical indeterminacy or vagueness. This new chapter also keeps the user-friendly format, certainly very user-friendly. And the chapter overview summarizing the main topics, concrete examples to clarify difficult concepts, annotated further reading at the end of each chapter, endnotes, and a full bibliography. Personally, unfortunately, I did not find the further reading very helpful. If you would like some reading, I'll point you to some anthologies and also a reading list that I made of core papers in metaphysics. But in general, this book does do a great job in introducing you to the topic and equipping you with the necessary knowledge and definition of concepts for success. So a big recommendation for this book. Anyone who's interested in contemporary metaphysics should get it. Thank you.